Hello there, folks of the internet. This is Risky Business, and today, what is on my mind? Well, Yandere Simulator is on my mind. For those who wouldn't know, and this is the reference image I've got up here, this is from the developer of another game called Watashi no Mono, which was a game which was going to be similar, if not in the same style as YandereDev or Yandere Simulator wanted to produce. Now, this has only come out as of recently, and it has been covered by some major YouTubers such as Some Ordinary Gamers and Kappa Kaiju over the years. And the one thing that this has brought to mind is that Watashi no Mono is no longer going to be in active production, and they are looking to sort of develop and provide the code to their followers as well. And going forward, the developer said that they like to do so. They advised that a lot of people started putting their game on the pedestal of Yandere Simulator instead of that, and that is the reason why the developer has then basically stopped producing the game to a degree. Obviously, they do, in this sort of post themselves, they do explain why they are actually looking to stop development of the game. They do stipulate that they don't believe it is due to Yandere Simulator, and given that it's on the basis that they effectively wanted to make the game, they made the decision that whilst they thought it was a fun project to begin with, and going forward the attention wasn't so positive due to the drama that they received from Yandere Simulator, whether it be from the developer himself, YandereDev, or from the community as a whole. Basically, they decided that they wanted to no longer develop the game itself, and obviously it's a bit sad to find that an independent developer who's looking to produce a game like this has now stated that he no longer wants to produce the game nor wants to get involved in the community as a whole. Now, one of the main arguments that the big YouTubers such as Some Ordinary Gamers have been bringing into the case is several now released Discord posts between either YandereDev and this developer, which is known as Home and Meal, and between Dr. Apius, which is the now creator of Love Letter, or Lovesick as it was previously known, because it's now recently changed. Now, I'm not going to get into the depths and the nitty-gritty of the commentary and the reasons behind this. This is more of a supplementary opinion video more than anything. My view of the point is I'm going to look at some of the Discord posts that have been made in general and point out sort of fallacies in the argument that YandereDev is producing. If you want a much more comprehensive knowledge and a much more comprehensive history, what's going on, what's led up to this, I will be putting the links in the description below to 2 videos, which realistically provide you with enough context to view the entire period as you would want to, and these are just opinion pieces. As per the disclaimer at the start of the video, this is just my opinion on it, and I can just point out just in these arguments, or these snapshots of arguments, where YandereDev is making some very flawed logical arguments. So with that out of the way, I'll be moving on to the first screenshot now. So in this post, which starts off from YandereDev, the context of the post, he explains that it's possible he has an entirely incorrect understanding of the situation between people, and that from what I can see, X is 2. I've maybe drawn the incorrect conclusion to the event, where X and X is 4. Maybe he's been misinformed about X. Obviously, the main crux of this, where I like to pull out the logical fallacy of appeal to motion, is what I do know is when people attack me, mistreat me, abuse me, harass me, their justification is Watashi no Mono, you're working on a project that negatively impacts my well-being. When I ask you, can you please tell your people in YouTube comments not to be chitty towards me, you won't even agree to me and do something as simple or basic that humane. Now, first of all, this is a clear appeal to emotional attack, or appeal to emotion fallacy, and in that sort of notice, YandereDev has attempted to manipulate the argument in question by basically saying, you're causing me harm because you won't do this. Now, an appeal to emotion is a very sort of basic level fallacy that people can fall into, and especially when it comes down to the very sensitive topic of online harassment and abuse, utilizing an entire game is not an example of an appeal to motion. Now, if YandereDev was correct in saying that Homemade Meal had actively pursued and actively made his community do this on a basis, YandereDev may have some level of point, but in context to YandereDev's own sort of actions over the past few years since he's been creating the game, he hasn't really led or created an air or an environment where he would not necessarily be receiving of actual criticism. I mean, the game has been in longer development than some AAA games and has been in the spotlight for many years without the game coming out. But going back down onto the topic of the appeal to emotion, the last sort of sentence in the YandereDev is kind of then correctly responded to by Homemade by going, you're literally asking to someone to take down their hard work to better your own hard work. That is not basic and humane. That is correct. It is a logical fallacy to assume that just because one YouTube creator or one independent game developer is not removing their work from a profile or from the internet in itself, which is the same sort of game genre as your own, and that because they do not actively monitor their own comments, that they are ultimately liable for it. This is part of the whole notion of YouTube being a safe harbor, and the fact that if they were to moderate their comments section in a more detailed situation, we may find it that the platform may even cease to exist in what we know it as the moment, because the amount of moderation would provide would be absolutely outstanding, other than what YouTube bots may be able to do. So with this one out of the way, it's a very clear logical fallacy in this statement by YandereDev, and obviously it's a very ill-proposed attack just to say, just because you're not doing this, it's detrimental to me. So with that, I will move on to the next screenshot. So for this next screenshot, we are looking at what appears to be a mid sort of sentence or mid conversation level discussion. It starts off with Homemade Meal advising, I took people's suggestions. That doesn't mean I'm incompetent or bad at anything, which then follows with the long paragraph from YandereDev. Now, in it, he says he feels like he's speaking to two completely different people in one reality. Watashi no Mono is a sham, the other reality, Watashi no Mono is a genuine attempt at a game. What I do know is that people feel justified in attacking me or lose faith in me or withdraw financial support from me because they believe WOMM is proof that I could be doing my job faster. But from what I hear, Watashi no Mono is held together with bubblegum and band-aids, and you have even had to reboot the development from scratch. So if I make a video saying, guys, you don't have to have enough income, the response is, you don't deserve the income, Watashi no Mono is proof, and I have to follow up explaining why Watashi no Mono it isn't an example of a well-developed game. It would also hate to suck ass because I hate drama when discussing other games, so if you came clean to your audience, then there wouldn't be an ugly, messy situation for me to deal with. Now, to dissect that, the primary sort of fallacy in this case is ad hominem, but there is an element of tukoke in there. And to explain what tukoke is, it is avoiding engaging in criticism by turning it back on the accuser. So you answer criticism with criticism, effectively, is what the element of this is. Now, the reason why I want to bring up tukoke first is because it's a little bit, you have to do a little bit of assumption, and therefore I want to get this out of the way before anyone brings this up against me. Now, the reason why I bring up this fallacy first of all is the basis of that, how YandereDev is wording the sort of conversation, or at least the post, or at least the paragraph that they've provided. In this basis, they are arguing that the criticism leveled against them, in effect, is only because Watashi no Mono exists, and it kind of does lead into the ad hominem. So because Watashi no Mono supposedly exists, people are utilizing the criticism that Watashi no Mono or WNM is getting better, or providing more content, or providing actual updates, is the reason why YandereDev is worried that people would withdraw funding or criticize him, etc. So he's effectively leveling the criticism, the fact that a game is being done better, against the person who is actually making that game, to say, this is the reason why my game is bad. Which is why I think in a contextual scenario to the entire sort of thread, that a 2K argument is going to come out in force, especially with how this sort of paragraph is structured. Now, the ad hominem is very easy to spot. So, it ends up the 2K argument because I believe that WOMM is proof that I'd be doing my job faster. It's an individual criticism. He should really be taking it on board. We're not really debating it further. Now, the ad hominem in this case is quite easy to see, as I sort of mentioned prior. Because I believe, from what I hear, WNM is held together by bubblegum and band-aids, and you had to reboot development from scratch. Obviously, there you go. And then following on from that, I have to follow up by explaining that WNM isn't not example of a well-developed game. So, firstly, you would have to comment of how YandereDev would know what the development cycle of Watashi no Mono was. From what I recall, Watashi no Mono didn't even deliver or release any public source code until the game has now gone out of development and has been provided to the community on the basis that if they want to continue to do their own sort of development on the project, it can now be an open source development rather than a closed source development. So it would be interesting to see how YandereDev actually knew the sort of development cycle when he probably wasn't even involved in it. The more egregious sort of overt level one is, from what I hear, this game is held together by bubblegum and band-aids, and you've even had to rebeat development from scratch. So, firstly, the idea of making this ad hominem is a bit egregious, especially from a lot of the technical YouTubers you can see out there. Again, some of the links will be in the description below, which will explain this on detail. There are many, many, many citations of YandereDev, which can be sourced on the internet. I'm not saying I'm going to publish them down here just for the sake of ease. You can go and do this experience yourself. This is only, as I said, this is a personal opinion sort of development. There are many examples that even myself, not as a coder, with a basic explanation about what's happening, would understand that what he is doing is inefficient levels of coding. And especially with how technical sort of examples have been shown on live video or live streams, it is very obvious to see that his attack is solely based on his own level of coding, which some would say is not effective or not up to scratch enough. Now, again, this also the ad hominem does tie into the action of "from what I hear." Now, "from what I hear" is a very personalized statement and could be even falling into another logical fallacy, which I haven't included in here, wherein it's just because you do not understand the criticism itself. And I believe, if I am to locate that, it is the personal incredulity fallacy, which means that just because they don't understand something, therefore it's not true. So, from what I hear, it's a very weak argument to make. I could say, from what I hear, YandereDev is the greatest dev in the world and has no following or no failing or has no equal. But then again, that is not an argument based off sound logic and reason. It's an argument based on my opinion, which obviously this may fall into a level of ad hominem against YandereDev on my own part, which I will openly admit. But I'm only here to just provide the evidence of my own opinion, which is not an excuse for a fallacy, but it is a reason why this fallacy is being used. So from now on, going forward, I'll go on to move on to providing my final thoughts on the matter. So, what is my opinion? Firstly, there is a level of dishonesty from YandereDev. This has been well documented, and whilst it is maybe the discussion for a future video, it's probably better rested on more well-known YouTubers, unlike myself, who's just making a commentary or passing comment on the situation. I'm not personally invested in this entirety or in this saga per se, and realistically, it's not something I want to be sort of dragged into. The reason why I've made this video today is the basis of just the sheer sort of fallacical nature or fallacy nature that YandereDev is produced. So I have mused over this for some time, and I have looked at the previously noted and which will be linked videos in my description about the matter. The reason why I felt like I didn't need to stay clear, or I needed to make a post on it or some reason, is just to point out just two of the many examples of where YandereDev has shown to be not to ad hominem him himself and fall into his own basis, but just as an example of where this individual has made very poor logical arguments to describe where he was coming from. When we are talking about the appeal to emotion in the first section that I looked into, if he had said or simply made the request that, hey, could you put something in your video, or could you advise people in your video not to go and harass me on the basis that I feel that your video is perhaps spurring on this or is being used as a hearkening method to individuals who are critical of me, then this may have some more credit than going or utilizing, oh, well, it's clear that your game is providing people with a vocal outpoint to attack me on. Can you, if you had really thought hard about this and know and understand what feeling this has had against me, then you would realistically add this commentary. If it's a reasonable request to ask someone to not, or at least add some element of a disclaimer to ask not to harass this individual, it's completely and perfectly reasonable for someone to ask them to do so. But to assume on the nature of emotion that it is basic and humane to provide something is completely off kilter. Now, the second section, which I found about the ad hominem attack, was a bit abrupt. The aspect of, if a game developer is doing something better than you get the right to criticize and effectively remove yourself from criticism itself because, oh, hey, I'm making a game, but these guys are making a game and it's therefore making me look bad because they're developing it better than me, then I think the games development industry as a whole would be saturated by these claims, especially when you're looking at markets of like first-person shooters, for instance, and why you don't see Activision slagging off someone else in a sort of fashion because they're making a better game than what Call of Duty has now become. Or in an RPG market, why Square Enix is not slagging off BioWare, or vice versa, based on the sort of aspect of RPGs. It's not an element that I would expect to see from a developer. Maybe it is because he is a sole developer, or he's working on a smaller team, that he feels pressurized into answering every social media post or answering criticism every so often. From even just a basic purview of this and a basic review, there is a lot of comments about how YandereDev spends the majority of his time not dealing with the coding aspect of the game, but simply dealing with the criticism aspect of the game. And one wants to wonder if he's spending so much time dealing with social media, that is he actually really developing the game in future? And obviously there's elements that you can go into there. Personally, if I had to deal with the YandereDev, I would completely just being completely brutally honest with him. The aspect of it is this is an individual who I personally feel is not fit to sort of project lead on a game where they have been, that the development cycle has been longer than certain independent games which have become commercial successes, which are also as an element of the evidence used against him in terms of development cycles. And personally, as again, this is an opinion piece more than anything, as I've mentioned at the start of this video, YandereDev, if you are listening to this, and if you do wish to content strike this, go ahead, I will dispute this. But my main sort of advice to you would just be to be completely honest. If you are struggling with the levels of development that you are doing, if you are struggling with the fact that you have either hit a brick wall in terms of how you want to develop things, or if you've hit a brick wall with competent game mechanic ideas, or you are now overwhelmed by the fact that you have so many functions that you could do to switch functions instead of if-else functions, and you would think that it is almost a sort of lost cause to go back and debug the game fully, be honest with it. Because I feel that your community, especially that you have hardcore die-hard fans that would still support you no matter what, they would still be there. So you would still have your core element if you go, sorry guys, I've messed up. What you would then appeal to is the people who are on the fringes now, who are between the lines of rose-tinted glasses and, oh, this could be a sort of failed project. Being honest to these individuals in a sort of sense that, hi, my project isn't going as well as it should be. Unfortunately, I am behind. Unfortunately, I need help on this X, Y, Z, which I understand is probably a very long shot if you are even listening to this, that you'll follow through with this action, will win you points. It's not a difficult thing to do. Well, it is a difficult thing for you to do, but it's not a difficult thing that would stop you from doing, if that makes sense. If you were to do this, you would find that your community itself would ultimately start to come back to you, because you would find that when you give honesty to people, that they are more than likely going to deal with you honestly, rather than having to go behind your back to basically make these statements up against you. Now, this is just my review of the topic today. If you did like this sort of opinion piece rather than anything else, you are feel free to like, comment, and subscribe against the video. If you do have any concerns or criticisms with what I've brought up today, please leave in the comments section below. I will look to answer them as well if I do have the time and if you do make a post. Once again, thank you for joining me today, folks of the internet. My name is Risky Business. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you have a good day and take care.